Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and let your soul...
Some questions, and it has to do with the biblical kosher laws. And a lot of people, when they're coming into into a Hebraic understanding of the scriptures, beginning to explore the Torah roots of the gospel message. One of the first things that they learn about is about the biblical dietary laws. And it can be rather intimidating for people that are new to these things. And we want to kind of demystify this concept. I get questions about this, emails and other things from people. And so I thought I'd do a very practical, basic teaching. Actually, I'm going to interview my wife. I've got some questions I want to ask her. This is rubber meets the road kind of stuff. We have already done a number of teachings on the spiritual principles of biblical kashrut, or the kosher, or the dietary laws. And so we're not going to get into that. It's basically found in Leviticus chapter 11. And we have videos on these things, and we have written teachings. And we get into what the New Testament says, and go over a lot of the scriptures that people get confused about, that are in the New Testament, and wondering whether these laws are still for us today. So we're not going to go through that today. But people wonder, when they come to the Hebraic roots understanding, like, okay, where do I buy biblical kosher food? Do I have to go find the local, find the local Jewish authority, rabbinic Jewish authority, and find some kosher deli or grocery store that's been blessed by them, and that's where now the only place I can shop? And if I can go to my local grocery store, what do I need to look for? What can I buy, not buy, this and that? So that's what we're going to cover on this quick little video. And the first thing we want to ask is, what is biblical kosher versus rabbinic, or what we might call Orthodox Jewish kosher? So let's identify that, because some people don't realize there is a difference between the two.
Well, probably the main difference is the separation of meat and dairy. In rabbinical kosher, they require you to separate all the meat and the dairy. It's based on the scripture, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And some say, well, that may be you're not to use an animal that hasn't been weaned. Others will say, well, you can't mix, because there might be some wild chance that chicken has been boiled in its mother's milk. Well, obviously, chickens don't nurse. But they include that for everything, just so you don't make a mistake. There's a huge halakhic fence around it. And that's probably the main area.
Now, that's not our understanding that's prohibited, because in Genesis, I think it's 18, Abraham fed the three messengers, one of which was Yehovah. We believe it was the pre-incarnate Yeshua, but he fed them meat and dairy. And the rabbinic Jews say that there was a certain space of time, 20 minutes or whatever it was, between when he gave them the meat and then he gave them the dairy. But the Torah doesn't say that. The book of Genesis doesn't say that. So we do not take that approach to understanding. When the Torah says do not boil a kid in his mother's milk, to mean that. In fact, the word boil means not only, if I looked up the Hebrew recently, it means to bake or any kind of cooking, not just boiling. So obviously you do not bake a kid in his mother's milk. You don't roast over the fire a kid in his mother's milk. So we take that to mean do not eat veal or something that's still weaning or nursing. And the Bible doesn't explain, the Torah doesn't explain why that's prohibited. But we believe that there are some health reasons or some spiritual reasons why we're not to, and we could go into that, but we're not going to at this time. So that's a big difference. Are there some other differences between, let's say, the biblical dietary laws and the rabbinic or Orthodox Jewish?
Well, there are places that I vary. For instance, they will say liver is kosher and acceptable to eat. But liver is what cleanses the animal and the blood of that animal. So because it cleanses the blood, I don't think it's clear to eat. So there's some differences like that also. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but
that's good.
Okay.
So the main biblical dietary laws, as found in the book of Leviticus, and mentioned some other places, but Leviticus 11 is the main place, is you can eat any animal that, as long as it has a split hoof and chews its cud. So that includes everything in the bovine family: cows, sheep, goats, a deer, and these kinds of animals. As far as mammals go, some animals have a cloven hoof, like a pig, but they don't chew their cud. Some animals chew their cud, like a camel, but they don't have a cloven hoof. It appears to be a cloven hoof, but they actually have a pad underneath it, so it's not completely cloven. Now, that's as far as mammals. Birds, it gives us an example of what's allowed to eat, but you're not to eat, scavenger birds. But then animals like doves and pigeons and these kind of things are allowed to eat, and poultry basically falls in that category. And then as far as fish goes, anything that has fins and scales. So any animal that does not have skins or scales, fins or scales. There you go. Yes, if it has skins, it fails. Thank you, Mark. That's good. So that's like catfish or sucker or shark or whale or porpoise or these kinds of things. And of course, that also includes shellfish, which is not a fish. It's actually slugs with a snail, with a mollusk or whatever, with a shell on it. So we're not to eat those things. And of course, the only insect that's allowed to be eaten is anything in the grasshopper or locust family.
if you choose.
If you choose. So, okay, the next question is, those are the main differences between rabbinic kosher and or Orthodox Jewish kosher and what biblical. The biblical kosher laws are very basic and are very simple to follow as far as what you can and can't eat, and we just went over those. The next question I'd like to ask you is this idea that I have to go to and I get this question asked, I'm sure you've been asked this question when people are new to these things, well, I don't have a kosher Jewish deli around me or a grocery store. I live out in the middle of, Wagon Tire, Alaska or something. So what are you going to do? And so can I go down to my local grocery store and buy food that's biblically kosher? It may not have been blessed by some rabbinic poobah, but is that okay? So where do people go to? Can they go to buy biblically kosher food?
Well, you can go to the grocery store. There are a number of grocery stores that carry specifically kosher food. Now, when you look at kosher, you want the animal to be healthy, first of all. And there are animals that get into our food chain that they're pushed through the food chain because they're not very healthy. So that is one benefit of the kosher actual stamp on it.
Now, when you say kosher stamp, that's called a hechsher. Right. Why don't you briefly explain that?
Okay. It's actually the slaughter of the animals overseen and by a person who's been trained to oversee it.
Yeah, in Orthodox Jewish circles.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a level, black kosher, where they actually examine the lungs to make sure that the animal is totally healthy. So that's probably the highest level of meat kosher. Would you agree with that, pretty much? I haven't studied this specifically in a while, but so the glad kosher is your highest level, and you need to have a person who's been trained in it to oversee it.
I believe it's spelled G-L-O or A-T-T? A-T-T, yeah.
Correct. And then there's another level below that where basically the animal's deemed healthy, and they've been slaughtered humanely. In our country, we don't strangle our animals. Our animals are, if you're on a farm, they're more slaughtered humanely. We have a group in this country called PETA who works overtime to making sure that animals are slaughtered humanely in this country. So a lot of that used to be has really been cleaned up. They've worked very hard at that. PETA is ethical treatment
People
of
for
animals.
the ethical treatment of animals.
And so they've worked really hard at that, and they've succeeded in this country. In fact, they've gone into kosher facilities that
slaughterhouses
that process the kosher animals, and they've had problems with some of their procedures. So they've really worked hard to clean up in this country. So you could be pretty comfortable with the slaughter practices. I personally prefer to stay in the organic.
Let me start. When we say slaughter practices, we're talking about you kill the animal and you slit its throat and let it bleed. Now on the farm I grew up on, we did our own butchering, and we would, depending on what it was, we either shoot it or chop its head off or slit its throat. And then we would make sure it was immediately bled, whether it's poultry or kosher animals. We had sheep, cattle, goats, and we also had poultry of all kinds. And we were very careful because we wanted to follow these laws. And the first thing you do after you kill it, you slit the throat to get it and let it bleed. And that's the same thing hunters, that's what they do when they kill a deer or some animal out there. And this is basically what goes on now in the slaughterhouses. They bleed it pretty well.
Generally they do, but we still want to get the blood out.
Absolutely.
And so we go through a process at home.
So explain that, yeah, because the Torah, that's another part of the biblical dietary laws. You're forbidden to eat the blood. Blood is not to be eaten. And that means we need to get as much of the blood out as possible. And when you buy meat in the store, you don't know how well, you assume they got most of the blood out. But you look at hamburger and it's got a lot of this red stuff, and they call it meat juice, but it's blood and mixed in with water, whatever, and you want to try to get that out.
Yeah. So we're looking for an animal that's healthy, that's humanely slaughtered. They're not tortured and scared, and all the things that you
when
would
they
look
get
at
scared, when they're scared, what happens is when an animal's scared, it tenses their muscles up. And so when the muscles tense up, it holds the blood in the meat. Okay, so that's why the Jewish shokets, that's the ritual slaughters, are very careful to have a very sharp knife and make one slice very quickly through the and so the animal doesn't even know what's happened. It's very, very humane.
I read a very recent article that talked about that area in a kosher animal like the lamb and the cow is actually less nerves there. So that's actually, a lot of times they don't even know what happened.
Yeah. So so if you, and the same thing I would say, there's some question about whether, like on the farm, we used to, at least with the larger animals, we would shoot them in the head with a 22, and then immediately, as soon as they're dropped, we got their throat open and they're bleeding out, and then we hang them and let them bleed, and then we process them.
But not all of us are on farms.
Right.
So
what I'm saying is that they died very quickly. Now, it's possible that the shock of the bullet could cause the meat to seize up a little bit. I don't know. I don't know physiologically what happens. It's possible, but you do the best that you can. And this is where to getting the rest of the blood out. So when you're
in a store, you may want to contact. What will happen is you'll learn some of your brands. You'll learn some of the places that you can get your meat. For instance, New Seasons is a local market here, and when you talk to their butcher, they will tell you they walk the herds. So, if you're going to get beef from them or lamb from them, they regularly walk the herds to make sure that they're getting healthy animals. So there's one confirmation that you're getting a healthy animal without the rabbinic oversight.
So go to the store, ask the questions.
Right. Learn your brands, like Shelton. They hand processed all their turkeys. Totally hand processed them. So you learn your brands, you learn, where the meat's coming from, and then that'll give you a lot more variety and choices, because not everybody wants to go through the extra expense and some consider it trouble to get the kosher, hechsher, and approval.
And I remember years ago, we were at a local Jewish, it's a grocery store, a name brand grocery store, but it had a Jewish deli section in it, and they had meats in there. In the meat case, we were shopping for lamb for our Passover Seder, and they had these lamb roasts, or leg of lamb, or whatever they were, that were had the hechsher or the seal of the Jewish authorities on it, and it was wrapped up in plastic, and it was not frozen; it was fresh. It was literally swimming in blood.
Ew.
It was. I mean, and this was supposed to be ready to go, and it was swimming in blood. It was just blood,
even when you
not to
purchase-
mention all kinds of chemical additives in there.
Even when you purchase kosher meat, you're still expected to use the kosher salt at home.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So explain that process
Okay.
if you're ready to yet.
Sure. Well, so you want to have meat that is healthy animal, and then you want to have humanely slaughtered, and then you want to remove the blood. And those are really the three main things that you need to get to the kosher, biblically kosher, acceptable standard. So when you get your meat home, hamburger is its own critter. So what the rabbinic sources will tell you generally, you cannot kosher hamburger. And the reason is it's all ground in, and everything's just all kind of mixed together.
Although I would tell you, I ate, and when I was in Jerusalem at the McDonald's, they had kosher hamburger. They don't mix it with the cheese, but you can buy it, and it was kosher rabbinic.
I personally would never eat a hamburger at McDonald's, even if it said kosher.
I had to do it just for the fun of it, because that's the first time I've eaten at that restaurant in 25 or 20 some years, and that was when I just had to, the whole group was going there, so I just went ahead. But anyway, go ahead.
Yes, so personal preference there. But, so hamburger, I always freeze it, because we do have a cow slaughtered, and we get it from a local farmer who raises it organically, and et cetera, et cetera. And so part of that I have turned into hamburger. But when I get it, it is frozen, but even if I were to purchase it from the store, I would freeze it. And the reason is, when you thaw it out and everything thaws, all that blood comes out with it too. So that is one way to get extra blood out of hamburger. Another way is considered acceptable for hamburger is to do it under an open fire. Do not sear your meat. You know, when you sear your meat before you, like if you were to take a roast and sear it before you put it in the oven, the searing seals in the juices. So you don't want to sear your meat if you're trying to get out the blood. So it's acceptable to do it over an open flame barbecue, because it'll drip it out and it'll remove it. So those are some acceptable ways.
And that's why you want to marinate your meat first in some good flavors before you put it on the barbecue. Those of you that are into barbecuing, that way you'll still get good flavors in there, and the meat will be tender and be juicy, even though the blood's coming out. But you'll put good flavors in there through the marination process.
You can also soak it in salt water, which is where we're going to go next. But hamburger that has been soaked in salt water, you're on your own. No, it's like falls apart. It becomes like,
you can't make
I don't even oatmeal. You know? So, but that's personal choice. When it comes to roast and other cuts, you know, leg of lamb, whatever, there's a couple ways to go. You can soak it in the salt water using the kosher salt, and the instructions are right on the box. You soak it, you drain it, you soak it, you drain it. You can also get one of these screens. It's like a colander, but it's like a screen, and if you pull it apart, it, you know, latches on your sink or whatever. And you can totally cover it in kosher salt. In fact, your hands will hurt because it's drawing the moisture out of your hands. So I always make sure I wash my hands right away and put cream on it. And then I come back and I rinse it really good, and I turn it, and it actually changes color. It starts like a pretty red piece of meat. When you're all done, it's a pretty gray piece of meat. Truly. I think it's really tasty, and it's already salted. You know,
Yeah.
so and it's a long process. You know, salt is a natural preservative. When you salt your meat, it's a way to preserve it. So just sitting out for hours while you go through the process, depending on how long it takes you, it doesn't hurt the meat because that kosher salt really protects it also.
Yeah, very good. Now, let's talk a little bit more about hechshers, the various symbols that we can find on food. There are many, it's called hechsher, H-E-C-T-U-R-E-S, or singular without the S. And these are, there are a lot of, there's a lot of them in, wherever there are Jewish people that live in countries, there will be rabbinical authorities who take it upon themselves to certify, and Sandy briefly alluded to that, certify whether a food is kosher or not, whether it contains pork, shellfish, or anything that's biblically unclean. And then they will put their stamp of approval on it, on the packaging. And these are things you can look for. The one that's the biggest one, that's the most common in our country, is in America, is the O with a U in it. And that stands for Orthodox Union. That's a
Union of Orthodox.
Union of Orthodox, yes, and a priest or
That's probably the highest one. Then there's
yeah.
Kof K also.
Yeah, yes, there's a lot of them. In fact, local synagogues will have their own and test local. There's right here in Portland. There's some, and so you can go online and look for the kosher symbols. Different countries have them, different cities, and so forth and so on. And that's a guide to go off of to help you to look. And so I want to bring that up.
But if it's a K, just a plain K,
just like the letter
a generic K, it doesn't mean much. It can be used, like for instance in Jell-O, uses a K. Gelatin is one of those kind of bugaboo subjects. Gelatin is rendered pig and cow hides and hoofs. And if you call Kraft, who I believe makes Jell-O, which I did many years ago, they'll tell you that's what it is. And I said, well, is it ever not pig hides and hoofs? And they said, no, it's mixed and they can't tell and they don't know which, whatever, it's all one big happy thing. So conglomeration. So they believe there are those, this is a line that you have to decide where you are. There are those who believe it's been rendered down so much it's no longer a pig. I have a hard time with that, so I will not buy Jell-O gelatin.
and marshmallows and things like that.
Right. So even often it'll say kosher gelatin and do not trust that.
Just a generic
Okay.
K, and that's because
But it'll say kosher gelatin on yogurt. Do not trust that. Call the manufacturer.
anybody can put the word kosher on something and there's false advertising
Well, the
or they don't
reason
know what it
is
is.
they can use this and call it kosher gelatin, but it's not. Okay, so it's one of those little hidden places that's a little bit dicey. If you see the K, plain K, it also means call the manufacturer because, like for instance, Organic Valley Family of Farms, they do organic dairy products. And most of them have different hechshers on it. And I called because I was confused because one time I'd go in and have a great hechsher and next time I go in and have this K. And so finally I called them and they said, well, that's so we can move our packaging between the plants. Because we don't really know what the plant is going to be. Maybe this one, which certifies under this hechsher, needs more packaging, where the next week we need to send it over here. So, but it's all kosher, it's all certified by
They follow the same standards throughout.
respected, yes, certifying agencies. So it just depends, it's worth some phone calls so that you know.
Well, that's a good caveat. So let's talk about dairy, because dairy is a big issue. Because of some things have pork in them, and the cheeses, and in the milk there can be pig products, also in cheeses. You got animal rennet and versus microbial rennet, and this kind of thing. Maybe discuss that a little bit.
The animal rennet can or may or may not be pork, but you don't know. So treat it as if it is. If it says animal in it, just walk away from that cheese. And usually where you see that is cheese. The vitamin D2 can be plant sourced. Now they usually have vitamin D3, and that has to be animal sourced. So
I think that's a federal law. They have to
have vitamin D in your milk products, yes. And that has to do with keeping us all healthy, whether we want to be or not.
According to governmental standards.
Yes. So you'll see that vitamin D3. Well, Organic Valley Family of Farms, I called them and I said, okay, you got your vitamin D3 on here, but you've got this really respected hechsher. How do you do it? And they use sheep lanolin. The lanolin off the sheep. It's not the animal itself, which, sheep is still kosher. Yeah, but they don't use the pig. So you need to become familiar with your brands, make your phone calls, write your letters. The world is so easy now because of the internet. Because usually you can go to their website now and find out. I'm often standing in the store with my little smartphone and I'm looking up, okay, so, and then I'm finding out what they say on their website. If they don't say, I'll hit that call button and I'll stand right there looking at the product, talking to a customer service person, which you couldn't do, how many years ago. So it's really gotten easy for us now. If you're not sure, walk away.
Yeah. Well, and also, you got to read your labels, because sometimes these unclean food ingredients hide behind fancy names, like chemical names and names that are hard to produce. They hide, and so you've got to be, we're reading labels all the time. Once you get to know what you can buy, you don't have to read labels, but new stuff, we're reading continually. And that's one of the beautiful things about people coming to the Hebrew roots of the Christian faith, the Torah, is that their health improves because they become label readers. What that means is they're looking for whether it's got pig or shellfish or something in it, and then when they begin to read the labels, they go they read all these Latin words that they never knew were in these chemicals, and they go I've been eating this, and suddenly you become aware of all these chemical ingredients that are in French fries or potato hash browns, and you realize that, man, potato is maybe not even the #1 ingredient, and
hash browns aren't hash browns.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been there, and that's why we don't eat out much. And you begin to realize I've been eating all this garbage. No wonder I'm sick. So not only does your health get better because you're eating biblical kosher, but you're starting to eat. Basically, you're saying, I don't want to eat I want potatoes. I don't want all that. And you start to become, your level of conscious awareness rises, and you begin to eat better because you realize, I'm the temple of the Holy Spirit. I don't want to put this garbage in my body. And you start to feel better. Your health gets better. And this is part of the holistic. Torah is very holistic. It's not only your spiritual health, but it also improves your physical health. And this is one of the unintended or intended side effects of moving in this direction.
Not only that, when you read a label, there's things you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Don't just blow over them. Because ice cream, they sell a product, and I wish I could remember, Nathan kind of threw this at me just an hour ago. But I can't remember off the top of my head what these are. But beaver anal glands, it's actually a product you'll find in a lot of ice cream.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and I wish I could.
Flavor.
I think it's like a vanilla flavor.
It's a vanilla flavor.
What?
Yes.
Lemon. Natural lemon flavor is beaver glands. Almost.
Is that what it is?
And you don't know what that is, right? Excuse me. So that's where the kosher hechsher is helpful, because it's not telling you it's healthy. Okay. There's nothing about that hechsher that is saying this is a healthy food. What it's saying is there's nothing in here that's specifically prohibited in this food. So that's what that hechsher means. And there's been somebody who's been trained to oversee that. Like when we ran into a very wonderful gentleman in Newport. We were walking along, Nathan had his ZCs on, he's like, hey, shalom aleichem. And
They're walking along the bayfront, right near some fish canneries, or the fish are coming in off the boats, and this guy's walking along there,
Well, no, he was in the building.
He was in the
We were
building.
walking along.
And he came out.
And he saw him with his tzitzit. He goes, hey, shalom aleichem. And Nathan goes, aleichem shalom. And so they started talking. And he is one of these people who certifies.
He's
And
Jewish, and
he said these fit Orthodox.
He was
Now,
sent down by the establishment, the Jewish establishment here in Portland, down there to oversee.
because what they do at these canneries is they catch the fish overseas, and then they bring them here to do a step, and then they go overseas for another step, and then they come over here for another step. These fish are being going back and forth. And every single step they need to make sure that they're not contaminated with an unkosher, fish. So they have to have people there overseeing them. So that hechsher is very seriously taken. There are people doing the work for that. The other thing is, like for instance, I believe it's yogurt, that I believe the strawberry and the red coloring is crushed bugs.
Carmine. Look for the word carmine.
Yes.
C-A-R-M-I-N-E. It's beetles that are red.
Crushed.
We
So,
stopped buying that brand of yogurt. It's available at Costco and places.
so don't just blow over some of these things and go, oh, carmine, I see that all the time, or natural flavorings. Well, what does that mean? We can't eat wheat, several people in our family, and I can't have corn because it does things to us that is unpleasant. So when we see natural flavorings, we've learned, well, what is that natural flavoring? And sometimes it can be really surprising what they come back with on that. So look everything up. There's some good apps you can get online, kosher fish lists, things like that are really helpful when you're in the store. It's helpful when you're at the fish market and they still have their eyes in their head staring back at you from the ice. You know that you can see if it's got fins and scales, right? But often when we go to the fish market, how are they? It's just the fillets. So it's really hard to tell. So you need to know,
Which
what it
fish
is.
are and what they are. Don't just say, yes.
You know that there's a lot of food products out there with the word cellulose on it. Cellulose is just another name for wood pulp.
Cellulose. Yeah, cellulose, but wood is not prohibited. If you want to eat wood, but wood
It's allowed.
Yeah, wood is not prohibited from.
You can chew on a toothpick.
Yeah. But now.
But maybe not a mint flavored one. You have to check on that.
There's a lot to learn. Yeah, and another thing that we have to watch out for is like some of your vitamins, gel caps. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, then you're back to gelatin.
Yeah.
Now, if you can get the most now when you're getting into the medicines, they're trying to get away from the pork. But it's worth asking. There was a thyroid medication out that was really popular, especially in the natural field, called Armour Thyroid. And that came from pig. And the reason is pig is very close to humans. And so they can use the hormones and stuff from pig as a replacement for people. So, unless you know these things, so it's worth checking and asking. And usually your pharmacist will either know or they can get the information for you if you're on a medication. If you get gel caps, ask for vegetarian gel caps. And if you look for that, you're quite a ways down the road.
You got to be careful what kind of tuna you buy too. There's a good kind of tuna, bad kind of tuna.
I look for the hechsher on that, and also Delphin Safe.
Yeah. Sometimes they catch a lot of things in the net and it all goes in there. So, questions or anybody wants to add something? Heidi.
On the vitamins, if the source is porcine.
Porcine.
Porcine is pork.
On vitamins, if it says porcine, that's pork. Exactly.
Bovine
Fancy.
is cattle.
Yeah.
Yes, and porcine is pork.
Yes. And equine is horse, yes.
Yeah.
And watch
And you
your
don't want
fish
that.
oils and things like that, because some of that comes from shark.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Anna.
You mentioned that before, the thing that is added in some juices. I look at that right now. Annatto color, it's coming from also not color.
In juices, some of the red color coming from.
Annatto color, it says.
Annatto is.
Annatto, I think, is all right.
Yeah. Annatto is kind of a yellow color, like you put it in butter.
I
You
thought
see it in
that
butter?
it's coming from
It's good. If in doubt, check it out.
Yeah.
If in doubt, because there's a lot of names you don't know what they mean. Some of them are.
Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. is near, he's near, he's near. Yeshu Hashem be'imatzov kerahu yoto karov, karov. Yasov rasha darko ve'ishavem machshevotav ve'yashovel ad Hashem ki arbe is Yeshu Hashem be'imatzo kerahu yota karov, karov. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon his name. He is near, near, he is near. Yeshua Hashem be'imatzo kerahu